Is it okay?
Yeah, just go. Don't go.
I don't
Yeah,
mind. Yeah.
yeah. You can just get started whenever you're ready.
Yeah. So I can start. It's just a window. Yes. Share full screen. All right. Can you see my screen? Yes. All right. So yeah, it is my honor and privilege to share my work in the 23rd annual Water, Humans, and Computing WaterHCI conference. My name is Seungmin Park. I'm an instructor of urology at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Um, Before joining the Department of Urology, I used to be in the Department of Radiology for last 7 years. I used work for Dr. Sanjeev Sam Gambier, who's the chair of radiology for last like 12 years, and he was a truly amazing scientist and physician. He's the one who actually trying to revolutionize in the healthcare. So he passed away last year because of cancer, and it is kind of unfortunate for us because he was recognized as a pioneer in terms of early cancer detection. He was the true leader of radiology that he was able to diagnose variety of cancer, but ironically he passed away from cancer because he was not able to diagnose his own cancer. And he proposed a really revolutionary the concept in the field of medicine, which is called the precision health, which I will explain here. So so this talk, I'm gonna introduce about why we're working on this specific area, background and motivation, especially about the precision health. Then I'll actually change my topic to the excreta-based diagnostic system, which is majorly actually performed in the water, toilet water. And then I'll give you some research summary and acknowledgement to the work. So first, just want to introduce precision medicine prior to the precision health. Precision medicine is a one of the um, one of Barack Obama's initiative. So he believes that because everybody is unique, so every treatment to disease has to be unique to a person. So, what if we figuring out the right dose of medicine was as simple as taking our temperature? So that's going to be depending on who you are. So we value a personalized medication, personalized treatments. So this is the basis of the precision medicine. This precision medicine initiative was funded by the Barack Obama administration around like a $350 million, and Dr. Eric Topol from Scripps Institute, he's the head of this initiative. But nowadays, it's more important to think about the before, you get ill. I mean, if people get ill, precision medicine will provide the right treatment for you. But precision health is slightly different because precision medicine is regarded as a reactive approach to the disease treatments or intervention. But precision health is more proactive and personalized healthcare that's focuses on prevention and early detection via longitudinal monitoring of an individual. So as you can see in this diagram, Dr. Sanjeev Gambier convinced this idea like a long time ago. So he believed that even a person is in his mother's womb, we can do genetic screening. We can take a look at the family history. We can take a look at the socioeconomic factors of a person, even a person is even before a person is born. Then, based on those assessment, we can give him a risk assessment at all stage of life. So, based on those risk assessment, we can provide a customized monitoring tool. This customized monitoring tool will generate tons of data every day. Then it can be fed into the integrated health portal, where the data analytics and proactive proactive intervention happens. So data analytic includes a pattern recognition, machine learning approach, predictive modeling, and digital twin and actionable response determination. So in order to deploy successful precision health concept to the world, low cost, repeatable, and reliable technology are required. So this is how Dr. Gambier envisioned that it can be performed in the home setting. So passive monitoring is one of the important key because if you need to increase the user acceptance or user compliance to a device, they will eventually not wear the device. Such as your let's talk about your smartwatches. Smartwatches actually give you really great deal of human health data, but one of the limiting factor for that is because if you want to measure like a CKG or EKG or something like an electrocardiogram for yourself, you have to actively engage to the smartwatch. So Dr. Gambier envisioned that passive monitoring is one of the key aspects of precision health. So as you can see, we have automobile. We can embed sensors over there to look at the what's the style of a human over there, like a driving style that will tells you about the vital signs, stress, or environmental factors. In the bedroom, you can set up a sensor to the bed so they can actually see how like a degree of the sleep you have last night. Of course, you can have like a medication compliance, or you can even actually take a look at the refrigerator with using your smart glass to look at the dietary habits and the food imbalance or something like that. But one of the most important aspect of this application is your bathroom. So you can take a utilize of the saliva with a smart brush, or you can use a mirror. We can call it wise mirror. That's look at your cardiometabolic features of your facial expression, or even your weight. I mean, this scale has already have like different functions, such as measuring your body fat, measuring your body mass, muscle mass, all those kind of stuff. But one of the most interesting thing that can happen is in the toilet. So we're trying to focus on the urine and stool because nobody can avoid it. You have to go to the restroom. You have to at least generate human excreta almost every day. So if we can utilize any kind of health information from those human excreta, it will be very, very useful. But there's a kind of associated cultural taboo, or we can even call it some of like a limitation in dealing with the human excreta. That is the limiting factor to utilize human excreta as a diagnostic tool. We just simply flush it that away. So it's kind of shameful. So we're more interested in the digital biomarker, so which can be defined as physiological, biochemical, and behavioral data collected by the smart devices. So it's inherently quantitative. It can be collectively analyzed with a predictive modeling, and it can be used for health pattern recognition. Even from that, we can do some actionable response determination. So, what kind of response can be determined by based on these digital biomarkers? So, one of a great example is a recent research that was performed at Stanford. Dr. Michael Snyder, who's the guru of this digital healthcare, he just published a paper by using smartwatch data to predict the COVID-19 screening. So it's a great actually amount of attitude toward to the those kind of wearable technology. But as I mentioned, there's almost no such technology in bathroom because because the human excreta usually excreted in a way like natural way, so you don't have to worry about like getting blood from your arm because it's just naturally excreted. If we collect those information to use as a digital biomarkers, it will be very helpful in terms of managing one's health care. So we envision that the digitization of the events, any kind of event, will lead to the digitalization of disease management, and it will eventually get into the digital transformation of healthcare. So we believe that ultimate digital biomarkers can be biochemical parameters of your human excreta or any kind. I mean, any kind of human biofluid. So it includes automatic sample collection, sample preparation, recognition, amplification, and transduction. And the lastly will be the integration and the instrument design. But one of the most challenging part is the sample collection. Think about your toilet. It's a very narrow, very small device that can be mounted onto the toilet. So we have to think about the clever way to avoid this laborious, sample collection processes. And I will introduce you very soon. So based on those data, like a future data we can collect it from the toilet, we can establish a human health model. So I have a grand hypothesis on it. So based on those human health model, we want to use the time derivative of those digital biomarkers. So time derivative only can obtained by the longitudinal monitoring of a multiple human health factor. So the gateway for that is a smart toilet because it can be performed in passive way so that the it will not interfere with any kind of normal human behavior in the toilet. So we can accrue data over like a large amount of time so that we can actually establish a very accurate human health model. So I'll talk about the excreta-based diagnostic system in your toilet. So this is one of a representative image that we're thinking about. We're trying to utilize artificial intelligence. So and talk about the like the connecting to the IoT. So it's the IoT device, and we're trying to analyze in situ and in real time. So luckily, this paper was published last year in Nature Biomedical Engineering, and which garners much attention from like a globally. So we have this paper has been tweeted for more than 14,000 times, and it actually scored ranked number 7 in terms of altimetric media attention score of among all published articles in 2020. So and as you remember, Dr. Eric Topol, who was the leader of Precision Medicine Initiative, he kindly introduced my paper in his tweet, and I sent him an email for acknowledging his kind introduction, and he mentioned that it is a landmark paper in terms of precision medicine and precision health. So I'll talk about the precision health toilet, smartest toilet that, as we claim. Um, in order to engage like a huge population to this kind of precision health scheme, we believe that the toilet format has to be mountable and affordable. So it should not be like using a pipe or using some different devices or like changing the whole toilet for monitoring human excreta. So we think that the mountable format will be the desirable format for wide deployments of this precision health toilet. And it has to be related to the excreta measurements. So one of the counterexample is from the academic research group from Rochester Institute of Technology. They just received a Series A funding for the commercialization of their approach. But what happened is they do not measure, they have a toilet, but they do not directly measure the excreta. What they measure is they measure the electrocardiogram from your butt, which is kind of clever, but it's kind of great addition to the what we can measure. But the thing is, it's not directly related to the human excreta. So this is one of the limiting factor of application. So as I mentioned, passive monitoring is a key. So we don't want to introduce any kind of stepwise, functioning. So if a user wanted to monitor their own health, what we're trying to do is it's a completely passive. So they don't even know they're kind of monitored. So that's going to be our like a third criteria. And fourth is a clinically applicable, actionable data gathering. So we're trying to make it actually as much as clinically applicable and actionable. And fifth, it has to be connected to the health portal. So we're trying to use a IoT as an infrastructure. So this is an example how we implement it. So first, we are using urinalysis. That's really simple one. Computer vision and 10 biomarker detection can be possible. And second is a uroflowmetry. So we're using again the computer vision to measure the urine volume, speed, and duration. And third is a stool analysis. We're trying to use machine learning, not the human effort on it. And they can determine the stool morphology and liquidity nicely. And fourth is I'll talk about how we integrate the system for providing a personalized healthcare solution. So, so we have an analog biomarker, which is directly opposite to the digital biomarker that is recorded by a user or patient for their own subjective interpretation of what happened in your toilet. So this is called the Bristol stool foam scale. So it can be classified into the seven different classes, and it's a diagnostic medical tool designed to classify human stools into seven classes. It was used for diagnosis of the IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or it can be used for therapeutic evaluation for chemotherapy responses. And it is developed by the Bristol Royal Infirmary in 1990s, and it composed of everyday language so that the doctor actually can give you this kind of card so that you can compare directly to your stool to this. But one of the biggest issue is that there's kind of recollection bias, and second, always it's kind of always that the professional analysis is way better than the patient or the user analysis. So what we're trying to do is trying to digitizing these events. So I first employed the Google Inception V3, which is deprecated nowadays. So I'm actually trying to use a ResNet, which is more advanced version of the deep convolutional neural network. And this architecture was devised in the ImageNet competition 2014, and it was trained on 1.2 million image set, and it was trained on the over more than 1,000 categories, and it has a really small error rate, 6%. And one of the most beautiful feature of this Google Inception V3 is that transfer learning is available, which means we can just swap the last layer of trained architecture for our own purposes. So what happened is they already have this kind of architecture publicly available. So you can put the like a random flower image, and they'll determine which flower you're looking at. So in this case, Daisy has a score of 99% of accuracy, or it can be sunflower from like a 0.5% accuracy. So, similar to that, what happened is we just swapped the last layer of training set to our stool images. Okay, so stool image, how can I earn it? So, I mostly acquire from the web search because there's kind of really wealth of those images in like a Reddit or in like a Twitter. So I acquired 2,364 image sets. Currently I have a more than 20,000 images for training. And the thing is I trained the machine by myself by providing the ground truth for this image, but I specifically invited two colorectal surgeon who were trained on such task. I mean Bristol stool classification. So what happened is we have a really great, match rate for the machine. So algorithm is represented by this green dot. No, not green dot. I mean this blue line, and the red dot is medical students who were trained on. So you can see that test stat is very comparable to their performance. So this is a hardware part. So I mentioned, it can be device has a mountable format. So we have LED strips with a pressure sensor on the bottom so that we know when the user sits on. And we have a really small computer which is called the Raspberry Pi, and we have a camera module on it. So this is the example of how we installed into the toilet bowl at Stanford University. So this is the actual image. So we have a pressure sensor here. That pressure sensor lead is very simple. So we can measure the total sitting time of 129 seconds here. And after measuring it, we accrue the image from the clean toilet seat to the toilet paper within it. So we deploy the first model of our. Yes. Oh, oh, sorry for that. Can you see my screen well? Okay. So just let me know. Yeah, just stop me whenever you cannot see anything. So I'll be, yeah. I'll, how about it's PowerPoint view. So I'll share. Give me one more. Does it okay. Does it work? No. Does it work? Is it better? Is it full screen? Okay, I did it, but it hasn't reflected it. Okay, so let me turn off and turn it on again. Okay. Window share. How about now? Yes, I'm on the page 20 right now. Can you see it? Interesting. Okay, so I'll use this scheme because I think something is not working. Yes. So what we did is a first layer of our CNN architecture has four different classes. So we want to detect the clean bowl state and the urine only state and the stool only state and toilet paper state. So what we can measure is, interestingly, we can measure the first stool dropping time, which is directly related to your gut health function. So it is like a prime importance for the elderly people. So we can measure the first stool dropping time by just chasing the image from the clean state to the stool state. Then we can measure the defecation duration for 80 seconds by measuring the time, first stool dropping time to the first toilet paper got introduced to the toilet bowl. And after we determine state belongs to the stool state, what we do is we introduce to the second layer of our deep CNN, which spans at seven different classes of stool. And as you can see, it's constantly talks about the Bristol Stool Scale 4, which has a right determination of the stool image in the toilet bowl, like a sausage or a snake. And as you can see here, it looks like a snake here. So we actually tested for 21 participants for 55 application events, and you can see that they have a discrete pattern of their, like, excretory patterns. And we have a really great match rate. So our CNN has a great match rate to the surgeons, the classification, overcoming the match rate between the user and surgeon, which is like a 20% less. And as you can see, we can even do the longitudinal monitoring of a human health, so that the red dot is indicate a human participant who chronically suffering from chronic constipation, while this blue dots represented what is that, the patient with the chronic diarrhea. So he or she may need an anti diarrhea medication, in this case For the red case, she or he may need a stool softener or sealant. Or one of the most interesting participant here is one of a thing that goes back and forth with chronic not constipation to the diarrhea in like several days. In this case, it may be the participant may be diagnosed as irritable bowel syndrome. So this is one of the example how we perform the analysis. This is the raw image, and this is a computer vision, how computer vision is envisioning it. So by seeing that we're using the active segmentation of a human stool, and this is how we extract the color directly from it, and that colors of poop can be used as one of the diagnosis tool. And of course, because the user will not mainly use their like a singular toilet in their home, right? If a user has to go their work, they're using different toilet. So what we did is we deploy the smartphone apps. It is available in iPhone and Android, not yet for publicly, but we're trying to release it as soon as possible. So you can, by using this, if you don't have any toilet nearby, smart toilet nearby to you, then you can use the smartphone app. Just take a photo manually, and it will actually do analysis by automatically. The second module that I'm going to introduce is a Euroflowmetry. So Euroflowmetry is very interesting. So this is one of a Stanford Euroclinic utilizes. It is called a Euroflowmeter with a spinning disk principle. So what happened is they have a funnel here. So that male has to stand and the pee directly on top of the funnel, and the female has to sit on top and directly urinate on top of this funnel. So what happened is they have a spinning disk in the bottom of this device. That spinning disk has a like constant rotating speed, but it will be slowed by the urination. Then we calculate how much speed was reduced because of the urine. Then we can actually estimate the urine volume, max flow, average flow, and stuff like that. But one of the challenging part of this application is it's extremely hard to integrate those spinning discs to your ordinary toilet. So what we're trying to do is trying to use optical vision, computer vision again. So based on this, so we use a two camera system. Then we just reduce the by using computer vision we can subtract all the background image, and we can reconstruct it as a 2.5D image, and we use the triangulation to calculate the volume of those urination. And then the result is amazing. So we have a conventional Euroflowmeter represented by the blue line here, and our computer vision is by the red dot. It has almost like a perfectly fit to each other, and we calculate how much overlap, and we have a Pearson R value in terms of duration is a 0.96, while the volume wise we have a 0.92 accuracy. And other like the factor we have urinalysis. Urinalysis is basically dipstick analysis. So we're envisioning that we can employ like this way. But I consulted to the one of the bidet company, and the bidet company has like a biggest concern of getting wet straight back to the housing because it actually caused a lot of waterproof problem, and all those like an engineering issue we have to resolve it first. Lastly but not last but not least, because your toilet will be shared by your roommates or housemate or your family member, you have to know who's using the device. So we're trying to use a flush lever as a biometric identification method. So this is one of the method that I can introduce. It's a really cheap. It's $18 fingerprint scanner that's available from Amazon.com. I just use a 3D printer to use this as a like a flush lever. And when you actuate this, your identity will be annotated. But One of concern here is that the most advanced toilets nowadays available by Toto or Kohler, they do not usually have this flush lever. They have an automatic function. So whenever a user left the toilet, they automatically flush it. So to overcome those issues, and other issues may be that if you cannot flush by yourself, then somebody else can do it for you. Then in that case, some kind of mixture of identity will be happening. So what we do is we devise a little bit of way that use a human anus as one of a biometric identifier, because human anus is known to be very unique to a person, according to the famous painter Dali. Salvador Dali, he actually convinced that this idea by inspecting human anus for more than 30 people, saying that it's a very unique to a person. So we utilize this function. So no matter what, you have to expose your human anus to the toilet, and if you have like a one more sensor over there, and as you can see, we just use a three different computer algorithm to predict who's using the toilet. We have like more than a 95% accuracy to infer who's using the toilet. But as I mentioned, this can actually cause a lot of ethical issue and privacy issues. We're still actually thinking about it, and currently I'm working on the IoT architecture, so that all kind of the privacy breaches to protect it. I'm going to use Amazon Web Service, because they have a really great architecture that can they can protect like effectively. And as I mentioned, because smart toilet, we're using the camera as a sensor, so that's is very similar to how can I say, as a spy cam in the toilet. So what we need is we need to measure the user acceptance. So this is very biased survey, but I want to share my result. So this is a survey taker from the Stanford community, and we have almost 300, not almost, I mean 300 participants. Then, as you can see, it's a highly educated population. More than almost like a 40% has a doctoral or professional degree. And the ethnicity wise, it's a white, and we have like a second dominant as Asian. But interestingly, we have a very favorable result. I think it's because they may actually recognize this as a research effort, but we may, if we actually frame it to the different like a consumer electronic, we may have a different result. But well, more than 50%, like a 52% is favorable, 20% is kind of indifferent toward to us, 30% is kind of not to our system. And interestingly, statistically, there are like a non-camera base has more favorable toward to the user acceptance, while the camera base is least favorable. I mean, as you can imagine, anal print is most like abhorred by the user. But we ask another question: what if we replace the camera with a different sensor, such as like different like an infrared sensor or like a laser scanner, which allows to us which allowed the non-reconstruction of the anus as an image. Then 70% of rejectee that they agree with us to use the system. So for to advance this technology, I'm working on more like pregnancy, STD, street drugs. We want to incorporate all of those, and we're trying to include the guaiac occult blood test on it, and the microbiome is another target. And like obviously we're actually seeking a funding for the COVID-19 detection. As you can remember, there's a wastewater study to detect the COVID-19. So by this effort, we're actually trying to propose this coronavirus integrated diagnostic toilet, COVID ID toilet, and we talk about some of the ethical issues. So, because of the time limit, so I just want to close this talk and by acknowledging my mentors. I especially thank for my mentor, late mentor, the Sanjeev Sangambir, who passed away. I really missed him, and this is impossible with all this collaborator. If you have any question, I'll take it. Thank you very much. Yeah, are any smart toilet in operation publicly? Was one of the question that I received, and yeah, interestingly, there's no such toilet for the human health monitoring yet. I mean, there's a kind of some of those. I mean, there's a like a Toto's, intelligent toilet introduced in 2008. They have like a urinalysis function, but the cost of those toilet is a $6,100. So kind of people kind of not actually buying it, so they discontinue it. But please take a look at the CES 2022 this year. Total will actually unveil some of their healthcare toilets soon. So it will be publicly available next year, and we're working with some of bidet company to make it, publicly available next year.
Great. That was really good. I think where this will really make a big difference. I noticed when you see automatic flush toilets, they didn't first enter homes. They first entered kind of commercial installations. That's where people have the budget and the wherewithal to design these things. So I'm imagining this product might find itself, in kind of more commercial installations first, perhaps, who knows. But you could imagine if this was more widely deployed, it might be something to manage the COVID outbreak, in the sense that if you're able to detect COVID-19, maybe you'd have something that would notify you if you had illness. And in any case, I want to. It's a very, very excellent talk, very thought-provoking, and I think we'll have more and more discussions. We had a lot of discussions in our DConference 1999, DConference 1999, DConference 2000, and DConference 2001 when we had the sensor-operated shower. We built the world's most advanced shower. It had a column shower with 6 stations, and it had 6 depth cameras in it, one for each person. And we actually had a graphics card for each shower station. We had 6 graphics cards in one PC, one computer, and we created the world's first GPU using graphics processing chips for parallel processing. Came out of that smart shower, and that work ultimately led to work presented on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. It also led to the creation of OpenVidia, the project, which is kind of a predecessor of CUDA, a parallel GPU. So it was a lot came out of that project, and so a lot of these things lead to in further directions that we might not even imagine in terms of what new discoveries are made. I want to now transition to Mark Matson, from the founder of Swim Drink Fish. Mark is my inspiration for this taxonomy. We came up with this taxonomy, which we call the Interface Taxonomy, and it was largely inspired by Mark's thinking, whether he knew it or not. His stroke of genius in naming the company Swim Drink Fish takes us into the idea of, we all thought, oh wow, that's really deep and insightful in some way, because when you swim, you go into the water, and when you drink, the water goes into you. And we thought, okay, and then when you fish, you're separate from the water. So we thought, okay, there's these 3 different ways you can interact with water. You can put yourself in the water, or you can put the water into yourself, or, of course, the water can come in and go out, and of course, in terms of the talk we just heard. And then the last category is where you're separate from the water, where you have, if you're going fishing or sunbathing or meditating by the beach, we have a lot of people just sit by the beach and enjoy the waves and so on. And so with these 3 ways of interacting with water, and we have the 3 ways of interacting with technology, you can have the technology like surveillance that's watching you, or you can put the technology around yourself like smart clothing, like these smart eyeglasses, or you can put the technology in yourself. So when you enter into a vessel, you become a cyborg. Manfred Klein's coined the term cyborg, and the example that he used as a person riding a bicycle is his favorite example. When he was talking to me, a good friend of mine, we talk about this, and he said, hey, the best example of a cyborg is someone riding a bicycle. And I said, well, what about someone on a boat? Because that's equally, because bicycles are only 200 years old, but boats have been around for more than 1 million years. Boats have been around longer than Homo sapiens have been around. So the very first cyborgs were perhaps the predecessors of Homo sapiens in boats. And so when you're on a boat, it's a cyborg extension. So when you're on a boat, you enter a vessel. When you have implantable computing, like implants, the vessel enters you. And then the third possibility is the technology is separate from you, like surveillance. So we have surveillance where the technology is watching us. We have surveillance where we are a cyborg and we enter a vessel, like smart clothes or a smart boat or a bicycle or smart eyeglasses. That's we call that surveillance, from the French word sous, under, meaning in English undersight. Surveillance is oversight. And then when the technology enters us, implantables, that's what Katina Michael coined the term uberveillance to describe that. So we have these three things. And then it's the same with the water and the technology. There's three ways that those can interact. The technology can go in the water, like you have the smart buoy. Steve Halford and I put that smart buoy in the lake to monitor the temperature of the lake, for example. That's putting technology into water. Or the water can go into the technology, and that's your smart plumbing, sensor operated valve, smart toilets, where the water flows in through the technology, or the two can be separate. So again, we have these taxonomies. So it's very much an honor to speak to Mark Matson, who is perhaps the stroke of genius behind a lot of what we think of now and when we talk about the interface taxonomy. So take it away, Mark.
Thanks, Steve. And I've been watching a lot of the presentations today, and they've been really fantastic. And I just want to say, in terms of genius, I don't know if it's an ingenious thing, Steve, but your swimming there at Ontario Place, not only today but every day and for the last couple of years, you really are the front line of clean water. Having a swimmer in the water really puts all the government regulations, gives them meaning and force. And so I just appreciate you and all the swimmers out there who are helping swim drink fish keep sewage and toxins and waste out of the water. So thank you very much, and I hope pretty soon it'll be an official beach. Yeah. So I'm an old criminal lawyer. Who, at one point in my career decided that instead of defending criminals, I thought maybe because I grew up on the Great Lakes and grew up at the end of Lake Ontario, that I'd like to apply some of my skills to keeping pollution out of the lake, prosecuting polluters, we used to say. And it was a group called EBI, Environmental Bureau of Investigation. And like FBI, most of the agents were lawyers because they knew how to put together a good case. And so we said they pollute, we prosecute. And when I would go around and put together these cases, the one thing that was missing was the swimmers, people fishing, people drinking from the water, these human uses. And I knew that, all of our laws were meant to protect humans, but at the same time, once they protected humans, they protected nature and wildlife. Whereas if you put up no swimming, no drinking, and no fishing signs, which I'm sure you've seen everywhere you go, we all see a lot of them. They were put up to protect people in the short term, from toxics, etc. But in the long term, what they did is they normalized pollution and took the attention away from these really toxic areas, and people just thought, well, that's the way it is. I live in a city, you can't go swimming in the water, the river, the lake. That water, the water is only good if it's officially sanctioned somehow, or you don't eat the fish from the Great Lakes because of the Myrics and PCBs and other toxins. And that normalization pushed generations of people away from the lakes. And so when I was doing these prosecutions, the laws required that in order to protect the water, I needed to have someone swimming out there. Then all of a sudden, the Environmental Protection Act, had force. The Ontario Water Resources Act had force. If I found someone fishing and they would tell me that they ate the fish, then the Fisheries Act had real meaningful law. And so as an organization, I realized that the adjective from the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement in the late 60s, which first put out swimmable, drinkable, fishable water as the gold standard for protecting our water, that these were adjectives, and I wanted verbs. So swim, drink, fish. These are take action verbs. They're very active oriented, and we got rid of the adjective and turned them into verbs, and we call our organization Swim, Drink, Fish. And so it's pretty clear, that our work really revolves around those actions and activities, and that those who are doing them are truly on the front line of environmental protection. And that's what we want. We care about water. Because I care about water, I care about our work. You saw Isabel and Maddie today helping do some sampling there of bacteria at the Ontario Place Beach. We share that data. We like to think we're at the confluence of people, humans, and technology. I think you've talked about that, the vector there. But we get out there, we connect at the water's edge, and we collect data and share it. And we're sharing it in better ways today because of technology. We can now share our data and not have to put it in boxes and do op-eds and papers. We can just share it through open access, and anybody can see it and use it and benefit from it. So that's how we think of our work. But there's no better way to see our work in action, or to see it really emblematic, to see it in real action, and than to see you and the swimmers that you regularly swim with out there in Lake Ontario, in an area that Toronto thought was lost years ago. I don't know what else to say today. I don't have the slides, and I'm still thinking about those smart toilets and all the great information that we could get from those toilets about what probably in a city like Toronto with CSOs, combined sewer overflows, that means when it rains, the sewers and the stormwater go into one and all get discharged. It'd be interesting to know what's in the toilets before they're discharged into the lake someday. So that'll be great. We'll be able to use that information. But yeah, I just, I don't know what else to say. Anybody have any questions for me? I can, one thing that we do, if you look at www.theswimguide.org, it's a free, it's an app as well on Google and Apple, and it's a website. And there are over 8,000 beaches, publicly accessible beaches there, all across North America. In Mexico, there are 11 countries now. I think we have beaches in where we update the water quality data. So we're constantly working with public health and affiliates and collaborators and NGOs to get the water quality data on a regular basis and share it into SwimGuide. So when you go onto SwimGuide, and go ahead if you want, I'm going to put it in www.theswimguide. There it is. I put it in the chat. And if you go there, find your beach, find your water quality place wherever you live. You can be in San Francisco or New York, Miami, and find your beach. And then you can go to that beach and look at the water quality data, how often the water is being sampled. Here in Toronto, it's every day for the 11 beaches at the City of Toronto. A lot of places it can be weekly or monthly. We have that data then uploaded to that beach, and then there's a graph there as well, which shows you how many times it was monitored and how well the water quality was. So it'll tell you if it's green, it means it's it's a go for swimming. If it's red, don't go in the water. If it's yellow, it means special status. Read a little bit more on the page about why. Maybe there's a shark swimming around. Or it's gray, and that means there's no data. So that was really one of our great examples of people, water, and technology, and bringing it together in a meaningful way to answer people's number one question they ask me, which is, can I swim in that water? And that's the number one question we get, believe it or not, as an environmental group. Where can I go swimming? And so SwimGuide was made to do that, but it requires thousands of people monitoring daily, weekly, but instead of putting that data into a box or doing a report once a year, it's uploaded onto SwimGuide within 24 hours so that it can be shared with the public and answer a simple question.
Excellent. That was a fantastic talk. That was really, really good. And I like the way that you're looking at it from human needs, because I guess the lake has no rights, and the animals and wildlife have no rights, and the vegetation has no rights. But I guess as soon as a human enters the water, it's very, very fascinating. It's super interesting because for me anyway, downtown Toronto has only one beach, Ontario Place Beach. It's the only beach in downtown Toronto. And when you go to the Ontario Place website, it says, is there any place to swim at Ontario Place on their frequently asked questions? And it said swimming is not allowed anywhere at Ontario Place. So it was very interesting because we'd go down there, swim, and then the security guards would tell us not to swim. And so we formed that Facebook group called Swim OP or Swim Op. We call them swim ops when we go down there for a swim. OP stands for Ontario Place. And so we'd go down there and swim, and then they'd say, well, we're not allowed to swim. So I said, well, are we allowed to have a boat down here? And they said, oh, okay, yeah, you can have a boat. So then I asked myself, well, what's the minimum viable vessel, the MVV? It reminds me of a time when the restaurants were all closed late at night, and the only place that was open was a drive-through restaurant. And we walked up to the drive-through window, and they would not serve us because we were not a car. And I was saying, well, I've been discriminated against as a cyborg. I've been physically assaulted in restaurants for wearing a seeing aid that helps me see. But this was the first time that I was discriminated against for not being a cyborg. In other words, I didn't have enough metal around me for them to serve me. So I said, well, we were saying there's a dumpster across the road. How much metal would you like us to go get and wrap around our body before you'll serve us? Like, do we need wheels? Should we find some old tires and stick those to the side of the metal to push it through at the drive-through restaurants so that they'll serve us? Because humans are a subspecies, and cyborgs are the we used to say people are subhuman. Now we say, well, I'm just a bare human. I'm sub-cyborg. And so the same is true of the lake. I said, how much vessel do I need? Like, I can bring my yacht. If I put a hot tub on my yacht, can I be in the water? If I put a pool on my yacht, can I swim in my pool in my yacht in the no swimming zone? And then I said, well, what's the minimum viable yacht? What if I cut a hole in the bottom of my yacht so it's all lake and the yacht's just a floating frame around me? And then I make a motor system so when I swim forward and swim towards the front of the yacht, it motors the yacht along, and then the yacht's just this machine that goes around to let me swim in the water. That should be okay, right? And then I got a dinghy, a little rowboat, and I cut the bottom of it out so I could swim inside it and push it along. And then
You're a great client, Steve, by the way, after all this. You've been thinking about all
gotta
these things. As a lawyer, I'd be able to really make these arguments for you, either at the Wendy's window or at Ontario Place.
it's all the same, how
Yeah.
we bear humans. It's funny, I've been a cyborg since I was 12 years old, and suddenly now I'm seeing the other end of that two-edged
Wow.
sword, which is the right to be a non-cyborg, the right to enter the water. Like, you can't go to Toronto Island, they say. You're not allowed to swim there. You have to be in a vessel. So non-cyborgs are not allowed to the island. And that's when I also got a paddleboard. I said, oh, a paddleboard's great because legally it's a vessel. Although it's not a vessel, it's convex hull. There's no way to go inside it. It's not a vessel. It's totally convex, but legally they call it a vessel so they can regulate it, and which is a good thing. You need to have a life jacket and a rope and a whistle, which is a good safety thing. But it also means that since it's a vessel, it can go wherever vessels can go. So now I can take my paddleboard anywhere vessels are allowed, and of course you fall off a paddleboard. It's part of paddling. And you get back on and you fall off and swim back to it. So then you're swimming in a no swimming zone when you're on a paddleboard. And so as long as you got a paddleboard attached to you, you're sort of allowed to swim because that makes you a cyborg. Even if you're not on the paddleboard, merely having a paddleboard attached to you with a tether turns you into a cyborg in some sense legally. And so
Yeah.
it's really interesting. With a paddleboard as a tow float, we swim to and from the Toronto Island quite regularly.
Well, there's a new proposal there to turn it into a swimmable beach, which means it'll be monitored and sampled, and you won't be you have to be a cyborg to go swimming out there. But you need, you need to keep swimming out there. I just want to say, like, what a great format you have here as well, Steve. I see Ryan's gone, but I guess this is just on Facebook. I don't know much about these what you're doing in this conference in terms of how you set it up, but really nicely done. Feels really natural. I feel like I'm in the studio with everybody, so really good job. Maybe you guys have done it for so long. It's really good. Yeah.
Yes, it's a real honor to connect with you too. I mean, we've admired your work for so many years. You've done so much for us and for the community. It's fantastic, and we hope we continue our collaboration as we make everything swimmable. Like, I think we should regularly have swims to and from the island, safe, of course. We always have a whole bunch of paddle boards together so we're visible. Get about a dozen
Well,
paddle boards together and just have pick a time when there's not too much boat traffic, and we do regular swims and just raise the awareness and get people out in the water and
Yeah.
make the lake swimmable. It's just so beautiful and scenic to be out on the Toronto skyline, and you look
Oh,
at other beautiful cities that have beaches right on the in
yeah.
the urban center, like San Francisco has stairs going
Yeah.
down into the water every 400 meters right along the busiest, probably the busiest, one of the busiest ports in the world, and it's
Yeah.
got bathing entrances every 400 meters, steps going down into the sea.
Well, I've told you about what happened in Kingston. I mean, that's where I started back in the 90s prosecuting the city of Kingston for a landfill in the inner harbor at Cataraqui. But the city, after they were convicted, and it was a private prosecution, and they were fined, and they cleaned up the landfill. But the community that was born out of that prosecution under the Fisheries Act really carried on to the rest of the waterfront. And the city of Kingston, then we went after their sewage. They had a lot of CSOs, and it was just the sewage treatment plant was too small, so they had to expand the pipe to the sewage treatment plant, upgrade it to secondary treatment. Through all of that, they had mass swims. They had shoreline shuffles where artists came out and put art along and really got people into the water. And eventually, the city of Kingston's water was swimmable. They also created what is called real time monitoring of all their pipes. So if you go to the city of Kingston Public Utility, every pipe is there live. And every one of them has a real time monitor at the end. So if there's anything being discharged in the water, you can go and see where and what's being discharged in the volumes. And that is state of the art. And every city should have that. Toronto should have that. Toronto releases their reports once or twice a year. We don't know what's coming out or where. But because of that real time monitoring, because of the the greater investment in infrastructure and separating the sewers, we had the opportunity, working with the Weston Foundation, to give them $500,000 to build a swimming pier in front of Queens there. They named it after our board member, Gord Downey. He's a singer for the Tragically Hip. He used to live across the street from that area. It was an old coal dock. And he always said that, he'd love one day to be able to swim again in Kingston shoreline. Well, he did pass away before it opened, just about a year. But it's now called the Gord Edgar Downey Pier. It's 20 feet of water at the end of the pier. It's got a big jumping, you can jump off into this incredibly deep, cool, clear water. They also built a walk-in ramp accessible to anyone. All ages are there. There's a shallow area. There's a beach. There's steps like you talked about in San Francisco. Claude Cormier, the architect from Montreal, who's done some other parks in Toronto, like the Music Park and the Sugar Beach. He did that in Kingston, and it's the most popular place in the city of Kingston. It's changed the whole city's identity. It sees itself as the freshwater capital again, and truly it is, at the end of the Great Lakes where the St. Lawrence starts. So I think the same thing can happen in Toronto. I think that Toronto should be, so proud that it sits on this freshwater, incredible freshwater wilderness, with the rivers running from the Oak Ridges Moraine through the city down into the lake. And all of it is it's a reflection of who we are and our health and wellness. So I want to get it cleaned up. I want to get people in the water. And I definitely want to celebrate you and all the swimmers who are really, Steve Hulford as well. I mean, in the work you did with the real time monitoring around water temperature, that we're able to put onto Swim Guide, and people are using Swim Guide more because of that. It's really helping us get our tools known, and hopefully these will grow into other cities around North America and the world.
That's fantastic. I mean, that swim pier is something really, really wonderful. That is a real stroke of genius. Like I've been saying, we need something like that in Toronto, because right now, actually, you can go out to Ontario Place and there's a break wall, and you can jump off the break wall, and there's actually a high elevated part of the break wall that goes quite high up, but it's a little bit dangerous, I think, because there's metal underneath, and we need something better. And the other thing is, a lot of children jump off the bridges at Ontario Place. There's some bridges that are about 20 or 30 feet above the
Yeah.
water, and
Yeah.
children constantly jump off those bridges because
Yeah.
it's fun and everything. But what we need is something like the Edgar Downey Pier
Yeah.
here. And in fact, I wanted to suggest building an educational pier, like creating something that's like a combination between a science center, a university, and a research lab and a water park, where there'd be, for example, a jumping pier that has 1 meter increments. So you could jump from 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and
Oh.
experience head. We're almost going to call it head games, because it allows you to experience hydraulic head as an educational institution, as a
Yeah.
learning experience. and I put that in the like we have that. If you look in our conference proceedings, we suggest that idea. We show the one that you built in Kingston as our point of, as our source
Right.
of inspiration, and then how we would build on that and add to it an educational component so that it's actually a teach beach, where you
Yeah.
learn by experiencing
Well,
head.
it's wilderness out there. It's so beautiful, and it's right in downtown Toronto, and it's our Rocky Mountains, and we just think it's a old polluted place that no one goes to. And here we have this access to something magical and something that can truly, be a gateway for anybody who's gone swimming. Knows what it feels like. It's like being in space.
Yeah, it's like a floating in
You're
outer
in an
space, especially with the VR glasses on
Yeah.
while you're swimming.
And
It's
that
just like,
starts all that curiosity about everything else to learn about water that we need people to learn because we need to protect it in more smarter ways, more meaningful ways, and not take it for granted. So yeah, it's a real portal to a different world. And we think that that's the best way to deal with so many of these environmental issues, whether it's climate, plastics, pharmaceuticals, nuclear waste, whatever it is that's going into drinking water, into fish, our food, our drinking, or just when we recreate in it, all of that, we need to understand better and do a better job of being respectful of this incredible natural wonder right at our doorstep.
oh yeah, that's absolutely well said. I mean, I hope we can work together. And being out on Ontario Place, it feels like you're in Lake Muskoka or something. It's just
Yeah.
so
Oh yeah.
beautiful out by the beach there. It's a rocky. I really do like the beach too because it's a pebble beach, so you don't have all the grit and grime and sand everywhere. So the water is
Well,
crystal clear.
That's one thing, Steve, I always do say. Canadians, I don't know if you know, but Canadians they don't really walk into water on beaches as much. Like we go to Florida and do that every once in a while, and there are some beautiful sandy beaches. But Canadians all love to have a dock that they run to the end of and jump off. And I think for
Yeah,
Toronto,
jumping
we
pier.
love to jump off. Just like you said, they're going up there at Ontario Place and jumping off. We like to jump. So we need to build something that we could jump into the water. Maybe it helps because it's so cold. I don't know how you walk in there in the middle of the winter. Oh my God. I just want to get in but
It was
we'll see.
beautiful today, 3.2 degrees Celsius, the water, and it was nice and
Eh,
refreshing.
Yeah. And I also like when you said that the water can't talk. It's so true. I remember you did the swimming in January and I turned the mic towards the water and you guys came out and spoke to it. We have to speak for the water. It can't speak for itself. And so we have a real obligation to stand up and represent clean water. And I know you do a good job of that. And really thanks for featuring some of our work here today.
Yeah, and the if water only had a voice, there's a
Yeah.
Greek word that means the voice of water, and that Greek word is hydraulophone, hydrolophonos in Greek.
Oh,
And the word hydraulophone, it's a word that we made up, that means voice of water. And what it does is it gives the water a voice. And the feeling that we had is that if we think of the lake as a musical instrument, at the Splash Festival in 2011, we turned the entire Lake Simcoe into a giant musical instrument. And the philosophy was, if you had a Stradivarius violin, would you throw garbage and would use it to store rotten apple cores and things like that? And so there's a certain respect due to the musical instrument. So we had this voice of water. We see the hydraulophone as a way, perhaps, of giving water a voice, and you can tell by the sound of the hydraulophone when the lake is good. And of course, the best sounding water is from some of the lakes, like Lake Temagami up north. And so we're also doing a project to use hydraulophonics to measure the water quality by looking at the sound wave propagation in
nice.
hydraulophones in the water.
You're so creative and you're so scientific. That's quite a confluence for you. Job.
Beautiful. Okay, well, now
Okay.
thank you so much. And now we have Mark Fox, who is a real expert in the world of smart cities. Mark Fox is a genius, an absolute genius when it comes to looking at ontologies of how cities work. And and um, so we have he looks at smart cities and water, and what we want to do is connect uh, with the work that Mark Fox does and in the area of smart cities, and see if we can bring that in and merge and join forces within University of Toronto. My goal here is to bring together University of Toronto, MIT, Stanford, and create kind of a nexus of water, humans, and computing, or water, humans, and technology more generally, and see what we can do to make the world a better place by really looking at the boundaries or borders between these three areas and what happens at these interfaces. So so Mark, are you ready to go?
Thank you very much, Steve. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
I can.
And is it clear? Okay, great. Thank you. And I've been enjoying the discussion in the 15, 20 minutes that I've been sitting here. I was just curious, as when you're talking about levels of entering water, have any of you seen the step wells in India? I mean, just that picture came to mind, Steve, when you were talking about those, different steps, different levels, and jumping up. But the step wells are the inverse. They go down as opposed to up higher to get into water.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I think something like that. It's going to be really fun if we could. I'd love to work together with you, like Mark. I think if you and like if the two Marks, if I could get together with the two Marks here and the three of us, I'm sure we could come up with something really, really awesome to build like a swimming pier at in Toronto with kind of like steps going up to different levels and experiencing hydraulic head, like as an educational framework. We could do research on it. I'm almost envisioning like a university, a combination of a university and a research lab and a theme park and a conference center or something. I don't know. I got some, but anyway, well, let's. I'm loving, just super anticipating what you have to say about this, how you respond to this.
I'm just trying to find which of my screens are screen 1, 2, and 3. So bear with me for a moment. I'm going to start my.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time.
Let's see. Ah, perfect. I think I actually did the right one. So can you see the entire screen? It's
Yes, we
not cut off
can.
on.
Urban Data Center, Mark Fox.
Okay, great. Okay, so a bit of background. My background is in artificial intelligence from long ago. The areas that I have worked in from a theory point of view have been combination of knowledge representation and in reasoning with constraints. And I've spent a lot of time dealing with large organizations and reasoning problems, planning, scheduling, et cetera, within those organizations over the years. And more recently, where given that I've been around long enough, more recent means over the last decade, I focused my attention on cities and the reasoning problems that cities face and the knowledge representation problems that cities face. And even more recently, as it relates to water, we've had a project for the last year and a half with the City of Toronto, Toronto Water Department, in which we are using knowledge representation, and the current term used to refer to knowledge representation is ontologies or applied ontologies. That is, how can we create representations of the things, the assets that exist within the Toronto water system, which covers both water and sanitation, and covers both what they refer to as a horizontal network, which is distribution, both going out and coming in, and also the vertical assets, which refer to the actual processing, whether it's generating potable water or it's processing the sewage before it goes into Lake Ontario. But I also work in a number of other areas with respect to data and ontologies and standards, working in the area of transportation, working in the area of social services and impact modeling of social services. And it goes on and on and on, the different areas that I've done work in. All of this is culminated in current efforts underway by me and others of taking the work we've done and developing international standards. So I'm involved with the ISO, the International Standards Organization / IEC, the International Electrotechnical Committee, joint technical committee, and in particular with what's called Working Group 11, which focuses on smart cities. So my participation in that working group is in the development of standards for the representation of city data, city knowledge, et cetera. And we have a number of standards that are making its way through the standards development process, and already have one of those standards that have come out in the area of indicators and measuring performance of cities. What I'm going to present within the next, I'd like to get through it in 15 minutes so that we have sufficient time for conversation. But what I'm going to present is my most recent initiative, which is the creation of the Urban Data Center in school cities at the University of Toronto. The school cities, just from a background point of view, is a multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary unit within the city, sorry, the school within the University of Toronto, which brings together the various divisions, departments, and faculty across the university. So it's not centered in one division or department of the university, but brings everybody from the social sciences, performing arts, engineering, sciences, archaeology, et cetera, together to work on problems that cities face. One of the things that I've always wanted to do within the school is to create a center focusing on urban data. And so the mission of the Urban Data Center is both to expand the opportunities presented by data in addressing city problems or just city operations, and also address the challenges inherent in data. So it's both an applied view of urban problem solving, but it also is more theoretical in trying to address the issues in using data and creating data, et cetera. I'm going to give a quick tour of the different work streams, some of which were underway and some have yet to start in the Urban Data Center, one being the Urban Data Repository, second being Urban Data Partnerships, third being Trusted Urban Data Governance Models, fourth being National Network of Urban Data Curators, the fifth being Standards for the Representation of Urban Data, six, the Tools for Management of Urban Data, and seven, the Tools for Analysis and Interpretation of Urban Data. So I'm going to take you through each of these. Usually there's one to two or three slides on each. So we're not going to go into any depth on any one of them, but just to give you an idea of what our concerns are. So the work stream one is the Urban Data Repository. We want to provide a repository of Canadian urban data that is openly available for use by anybody across Canada, across the world. And so it's going to be sourced from both authoritative and non-authoritative sources, spanning all urban dimensions, whether it's physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, public health infrastructure, etc., and supports research in urban data science such as curation, validity, authenticity, cleaning, trust, relevance, fusion, access, ownership, and privacy. All of these are fair game for what we're trying to do in the Urban Data Repository. The repository is going to have a catalog that provides access to open data sets that will be stored in the repository in their original format. Closed data sets not stored, that will not be stored in the repository, but accessible under separate agreement. And also web service access to data services, including real-time feeds, etc. Now, critical to the building of this repository is the catalog itself. And so the catalog is really where all the action is, because it will be a very rich representation of the three categories of data sets and data services that not only includes information about the provider, when it was created, usage license, the data model, but also information about the quality, completeness, validity, authenticity of the data, and also how the data is being used by others and what types of outcomes they've generated with that data. So this is going to be a very rich representation of the data sets that are either open or closed or accessible via web services. Now, all data sets are going to be stored in the original format. That is, if they are provided to us, we will store them in the original format. We're currently using CCAN as the platform for storing that. But all the data sets are going to be integrated into a single knowledge graph. Right now, we're using Graph Data DB, but the data that's openly available here will go through a transformation process where it goes from what are typically table-based, relational formats into a graph representation with the attachment of metadata, mapping onto ontology-based standards so that we can integrate the data by having the same classes and attributes being used to represent the data, and then merging all that data into a single knowledge graph. So that's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do, is create highly integrated data sets dealing with the issue of integration that makes using data today very difficult around the world. The second work stream is in the area of urban data partnerships. The goal is to enable the use of data for policy. Well, the goal is basically develop partnerships with a variety of organizations out there by first developing a roadmap that explores the types of data that might be made available, formalize research partnerships with stakeholders, streamline access to data, etc. The idea is to start identifying sources and creating contracts with them that allows for their data to be deposited in the Urban Data Repository. So far, we've already begun relationships in the health data area with the Public Health Agency of Canada, municipal data with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and StatsCan, City of Toronto Digital Information Plan. From a governance point of view, Innovate Canada, and from a standards point of view with the ISO-IEC group and the World Wide Web Consortium. Third work stream is the development of a trusted urban data governance model to explore models of legal, political, sociological, practical aspects. Trusted data governance process, as I said, is to ensure the ethical and responsible collection, processing, use of data. There are two types of governance that we're concerned with. One is what can we access, which involves the use of involves issues of privacy and rights to use, etc. But secondly, what we can use it for, which involves acceptable use of data regardless of source. And there's a lot of concern in governance on who can access it. There is not as much concern with what are you going to use it for, what are you going to do with it, especially if you start aggregating and re-identifying data due to the fact that you're bringing data together from multiple sources. And as part of the urban governance, we are going to be addressing the issue of who, what do we trust? Do we trust the organizations that are providing the data? Do we trust the ownership of the data? Do we trust that it doesn't contain any personal information? Its authenticity, do we trust? Its quality and the ethical and legal acquisition and use, do we trust that also? One of the key things that we're going to be pursuing is the issue of the approach of taking a life cycle perspective to the whole issue of trust in any type of governance framework, where we look at the issue of data trust and governance as being a you want me to stop, Steve? So put yourself on mute because we can hear you.
No, everything is good. Everything's good. We're just looking at the slides here and
Okay.
and trying
Just
to
put
get the
yourself
best.
on mute. Just put yourself on mute.
Put me back on. Let's put me back on mute here.
Anyway, the view that we have on governance is any governance model is fallible, okay? And that governance should be viewed from a life cycle perspective, from the deposition of the data into the repository to different stages of making it available in the catalog, to downloading it, to using it, etc. We have to look at the life. No, I don't have any. Oh, I see that. Yeah, it's coming through there. I don't even have that. Okay. Oh, I got lots of windows open. Hang on, but not on that screen. Uh, that's interesting. There's computer science appearing there, and I don't see it anywhere else. Oh, you know what? It's the application that we're using is keeping two rectangles from the very first slide. Well, let's do the share again and see what happens. Anyway, I think we can select the window, screen 3. Okay, allow. Okay, you're not seeing it appear there. Do you see? I don't see it any longer, do you? Yeah, so it's the same thing I'm showing, but I just restarted sharing, and it appears that the sharing system retains certain information from one slide to the next, because those two things were coming off of the first slide. Anyway, we're looking at the issue of governance from a life cycle perspective. Different organizations have said, do self-certification. I mean, there's Sidewalk Labs approach, et cetera. We think all of those are problematic and think we need a different approach. The National Urban Data Network is a network of data curators that will be located in libraries and universities across Canada. And their role is to identify sources of urban data, secure rights to the data, annotate the data with the meta information for the catalog, and deposit the data into the data repository. The next work stream is standards for the representation of urban data. The focus here is to provide precise, unambiguous representation of city data, enabling its integration across city services, both within the city and external stakeholders, enables cities to share data, basically. And we've have extensive amount of work that's been underway in that area. The ISO IEC 5087 series of standards has multiple levels of standards. 5087-1 focuses on foundation level concepts such as time, location, activity, resources, etc. Level 2 is a citywide set of concepts and attributes, properties, such as household services, residents, etc., that are shared across the city. And level 3 through N are service-specific standards for city data that are specific to the service. So transportation planning is 5087-3, and it focuses on vehicles, on transportation networks, on trips, and etc. 5087-4, which we're currently starting the standards process, focuses on public health emergencies. And wouldn't it be great if 5087-5 focuses on water? So I'm going to skip over that. And the next work stream is tools for the management of urban data. This is data science research into data validity, determining the degree to which data that is provided is actually correct or true. Research into semantic integration. How do we take data from multiple sources and integrate it? The standards provide us a foot up, but mapping data from diverse sets of data models into a standard is itself a major challenge. Research into privacy and ownership. What role do Do we use role-based access, organization-based access? What do we do? How do we deal with source-based governance like OCAP, which is the First Nations Information Governance Center ownership, control, access, and possession principles? Support data. This work stream will focus on data quality, whether it be measurement quality of sensors, sampling quality, classification quality, etc., and also focus on temporal management. What do we do? How do we represent and deal with data that is continuously changing over time? Well, I'll leave it at that. Then I believe the last work stream is focusing on tools to support the analysis and interpretation of urban data. This is not a better machine learning algorithm. What its focus is on tools such as experiment management, allowing for the specification of goals, objectives, metrics, data sets, and analysis process, specification of analysis process or pipeline, where you take multiple operations and apply it to data, and then applying data analysis modules to it, whether it be statistics, machine learning, and also visualization. But again, most of our work here will be in the utilization of existing tools as opposed to coming up necessarily with a better visualization. So that's a quick introduction to the Urban Data Center, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, that was an. Oh, you just come back here. Yeah, that was a fantastic talk. I'm really excited about that idea of having water in there. I'm just looking on the looking at the questions. I don't see any questions yet on the. But again, we'll keep this discussion going on the. If you come back to the WaterHCI website or Facebook page, we'll keep the discussion and questions going. But it's a fascinating idea to looking at the whole state of urban planning, and like bringing water into this is excellent. And I also love the ideas of ontologies. Like I think there's a lot to be done with ontologies. There's a lot to be done with knowledge graphs. There's quite a bit that could be done in terms of the interplay between humans, water, and technology in terms of graph, in terms of an ontological framework. And maybe we can work together on that. Mark, you, and also Mark Matson, the two Marks, and I, and Ryan here. Ryan will be up speaking next on the science of hydraulophones, science of absement, which is the area under the time-distance curve, and also talking about hydraulophones. Ryan founded Transpod, raised $65 million, and won the Innovation of the Year award. So I'm very proud to have. It feels absolutely wonderful to have such a genius like Ryan. I often think of him as a modern day Leonardo da Vinci, kind of an engineer. I would say an engineer, a scientist, a mathematician, and a musician, and a plumber all in one. So yeah, Ryan, if you're ready to go, you want to start a little early.
Okay, wonderful, and thank you, Steve. And I'd like to applaud everyone here on a lot of the the things that really matter to people in an urban environment, and how we can live our lives, smart design, and so on. So we really have to design our world intelligently, and also it was really a pleasure to be a collaborator with Steve and many others who really have this multidisciplinary view, and I think coming from all of our work together, it's a wonderful experience, and lots of research ongoing that really I think one thing that Steve and I really share is a focus on both the past and the future. Some people, I've been noticing some people look at the middle, like just now, but you have to be really thinking of what came before and really looking forward to what comes next. And I think and Steve is really an inspiration on that. And also this whole event is quite key for how we combine research and making lives that human interaction that really matters to all of us. So I'm going to be talking about a few things. So I'm going to be talking about massive infrastructure projects, and I'm also going to be talking about new research. I'm going to talk about kind of art and science and how they go together, and kind of a framework to put it together. And then we'll end with some fun with some music, and I'll show a few things that we've done with the hydraulophone. So okay, just a little bit about what I'm doing right now. So at the moment, I'm leading 24 universities and companies around the world in 8 countries, and we're designing aerospace vehicles and also transportation infrastructure. And it's really many different kind of products and designs that all go together, and even some medical applications too. And so it's very there are many parts of the projects. There's some of these projects that involve architecture, urban design, but also really combining very new research. And so with all of those projects, something that's really relevant to all of us here today, I want to show you how with many of these big projects, you have to understand a kind of fluidity between human and machine. And I'll talk about that today. And so this, what that really means. And so how this fluidity is really needed in the design of high-speed transportation vehicles, how it's really needed with both music and physics, so the arts and science, and how we really need to understand that interaction between humans and machines. And so I'm going to show you with the transportation example. So let us go to that first big example, and then I will be showing how that relates to musical instruments. So we'll show some fun musical instrument things. So first, I'm going to share the screen. Okay, so can people see the screen right now? Hopefully, yes. So if you can see the screen right now, I'm not sure if it's coming through on the broadcast yet. Is it? Maybe someone can say whether you're seeing it. Okay, excellent. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so first I'd like to tell you about Transpod. So we're designing an aerospace vehicle and transportation system to carry people, so passengers between cities at over 1,000 kilometers per hour. And so this is a very big project. It involves design of basically the Transpod vehicle, which is like a jet without the wings, and it operates like a train. And it goes through a protected guideway. So this is a new type of tube transportation that was conceptualized, the basic concept from over 100 years ago. It's been iterated, different conceptual designs, but now we've solved some problems with some of those previous designs, and now are working with several governments in North America, Europe, and Asia on implementation of this transportation system. So we've signed a memorandum of understanding with the Alberta government for a few $100 million first phase. And so this is part of a big process to get this kind of system tested. I'm also working with the European Union where I have kind of an appointment as chair of a committee working on the regulation of this kind of technology. And we're aiming to set up the same kind of thing in Canada. We're also working with the federal government in the US about this. And so it really all comes down to the core design and fundamental physics and getting the physics right. And actually, what you see here, there are two things. One is that the vehicle you see here, we're actually going to be doing a big product launch, a big unveiling of the new vehicle technology, which is actually not exactly what you're seeing here. So there's a brand new thing that we've been working on for actually a few years now, and it's going to be announced to the public. Very excited about that. So that's coming in a few months from now. Yeah, it's quite exciting. So this kind of this public-facing version that's a little bit older. It's quite a few years old. This is the same kind of fuselage. So it's the transpod vehicle built like an aircraft, and it's a bit bigger than it might appear here because it's actually the size of a small jet, where it's able to fit. In one configuration for seating 27 passengers, but we can actually have it up to 45. And so it's electrically powered and propelled by moving magnetic fields with these linear motors. And we have some pretty special technology for the energy management and propulsion and guidance and control. And so you have the guideway, which can be up above the ground or at ground level or underground. And so this transpod line is what we call it. And so that can have a guideway for both directions. So these tubes that actually manage the aerodynamics and have lower friction, just because we're removing some of the air pressure. And so we're working with the design of this kind of system in quite a few cities. The most interesting one recently was in Thailand. So it's amazing the amount of infrastructure that's being built there right now in Southeast Europe sorry, South Asia. And so in Thailand, that was a federal project where we're doing a first study for a transpod line there. But a few of the other cities in Europe and North America, where we're working at the government levels, and then working with quite a few partners on the initial development. So it's very a lot of exchange of many of these aerodynamics and civil engineering and propulsion and many other things. And so it's a type of tube transportation that you could say. And there were previous kinds like ET3, there was Swiss Metro, there was Hyperloop, but now we have a new kind called transpod, a new kind of tube transportation, and solve some problems with those previous ones. And so, and many different interesting technologies in guidance and control, and in also looking at the aerodynamics, vortex shedding, and actually this is looking at this guideway from the side. So those two tubes looking down the direction of those two tubes, if there's a hurricane force wind, because of course safety is a key thing there. And so the safe structural design and that vortex shedding, the fluidity, it really brings us back to there's a couple of really good examples of how fluid and flow is really key. And actually, when we've been working with, so Steve and I on the Hydraulophone project too, that vortex shedding and the fluid flow, really smooth flow is really key to analyze, and when you can make sound from that, actually. So you're going to see that in a moment. And even with vibrations of these structures and so on. And so it's really neat when you actually have a lot of these kinds of structures. You really have to think about all of the dynamic effects. And so this is kind of one of the stations that we've been working on, where the transport vehicle pulls up and does sort of a docking procedure, and passengers disembark and once load unload on different sides, and so it's very much like a train station. And so just a really quick view of one of the test track. We have the construction permit approved here and have begun early phase of construction. This is actually for France. This is a smaller test track, like a reduced scale test track. And so the sort of bigger, better one is going to be in Alberta. So that's why we've signed the agreement with the Alberta government for the sort of more full scale testing, unlike this one. And so that's going to be between Edmonton and Calgary and part of a future transportation line. And so there's all these different stages of kind of construction and testing and working with regulators on that. And so it's really interesting. Maybe I'll just showing different eye candy here on some of the some of these different. Oh, maybe I'll bring that up after. But anyway, I'll show some of the machine shop work that we're doing. That's in another video. So really, I think it's quite interesting. I'll just stop sharing for just a sec, and it's really interesting how all of that design, you really have to get it right. And similarly to how we've been designing those musical instruments and the hydraulophones, it really has to do with a very very reliable and smooth connection between humans and computers and machines. Because for me, from my view, when you're a musician on a stage performing some music, even a small fraction of a second, if something doesn't work on your instrument, it's no good. And same with a very high-speed vehicle. If even for a tiny fraction of a second, the control systems crash or stop working, then that could spell disaster. And so that's why with some of these systems where human lives are in the balance, you have to be inspired by some of the same musical know-how and design techniques in very fluid interfaces. And that's exactly what we'll show with the hydraulophone, the fluid interaction that is really key. But in the case of really life critical systems, what we're doing is many layers of backups and fault tolerant systems to make it work. So the fluidity aspect for high-speed vehicles, well, we have to look at the aerodynamics. We're working with supersonic shock waves, and so we have two aerodynamics teams that are working on all of that. So one of them is at a university in France, and one of them is over here, and so all of the vortex shedding from the vehicle and different things like that. Another thing is the really fast control and smooth control, and so part of the patents and everything is on really smooth control. Even though you have infrastructure, basically, when you're going that speed, driving on a road is easy. A car is very slow. And so if the road goes up and down just a tiny bit, that's fine. But at that speed, it's a major issue. And so you have to have all of these systems that realign at very fast speed to give the passengers a comfortable ride. So it's all about really fine, smooth, fluid control and fluid sensing. And so all of this is full of optical sensors, and it's full of sensors all over, and really fluid control. So it comes back to, just as when you are designing a musical instrument, where the musical instrument has to be very intimately linked with the human. There has to be a very intimate link between your fingers, or if you're blowing on a wind instrument, what your mouth is doing and what sound results. And so you can't, so that's why some of these failed instruments actually have some issues. Some of these cheap keyboards that you can buy, or and then on the other side, that back to the theremin kind of idea, where you can't tell what you're doing, so you wave your hand. That instrument where you wave your hands and you make ooh. So that instrument is very fluid in a way, but it doesn't have the feedback to the person. And so with the high-speed transportation projects, that's very key. And so we're really looking with not only the mechanics of it, but the environmental aspects too. And so you really have to look at waters and streams and forests and ecological effects. So even one of the routes that we're looking at in Europe, where they actually already have protesters that were protesting a previous train proposal because of the noise pollution. But now with what we're doing, it's more contained and acoustically isolated. So this kind of solutions like that are helpful. But we really have to pay attention to all the ecological effects, even of the construction, and also the long-term effects, and really get the design right with plant ecology, animal ecology and behavior, edge effects around forests, and edge effects at rivers. And so so we're using some of the latest research on edge effects and how it affects animal behavior to really design this a smart way. And so, but the whole idea of an interface, a human-machine interface, it surrounds you. So it's really interesting with a vehicle that is your protective surrounding. I mean, you can be in a car and it protects you from, it has some crash protection, some airbags and so on, energy absorption. And so this transport vehicle is kind of like that clothing, that cyborg clothing around you that is part of that human-machine interface. And so the funny thing is with transport, since we have a reduced pressure outside of the vehicle and inside this tube that it goes in, the tube itself is sort of inverse clothing. It's clothing that's inside out because it has to protect so you have the environment for the passengers and the environment of the outside world, and you have high pressure in here and you have high pressure pushing in there. So it's the clothing inverted. So you have these different layers between the human and environment and another environment and another environment. And so just as we are about to get into more the interfaces and how, really interesting musical instruments and things, I'd like to share with you, well, first, why don't I share with you one example of some musical instruments, and just to get your mind going on how that works. So this is one example of that, and so I think I'm sharing the sound of this. And so this is a hydraulophone, and so what we're hearing here is the sound of the water inside that instrument as the human fingers are really carefully moving over the water flow. And so this is an instrument that Steve Mann and I and Chris Amony and several other people were working on. And we've had many different types of hydraulophones. So you hear it here, just that really fluid interaction. So if there's time, what I'll do is I will keep on playing more of the hydraulophone, and So I just hope everyone can still hear. So that instrument is really interesting because in how you you really have fine control over with your finger on the water, and you really feel that water flow going past you. So it's really amazing to have. It's really visceral experience because it's kind of like swimming. It's like mini swimming. So you've jumped into the pool with your fingers. Now you can actually jump into the full pool with a hydraulophone. Um, and so that's no problem too. And we actually had a concert in Denmark where we did this underwater concert. So we had half the audience sitting in chairs, you know, as a normal music concert audience. Then we had the other half of the audience with snorkels, and they're underwater to hear the sound, and so that was really interesting a concert that we did a few years ago, and it was a place called the Vand Kulturhuset. That was the place. That's Danish for water culture house, and so it's amazing how you can really mix the arts and water and it's fun experiences like that because it's really kind of this trying to do this high arts kind of experimental music at the same time as with hydraulophone. I mean, it's part of it is to make it simple too. So if you want to play simple recognizable melodies, then you can play so the different, you know, you can play a scale with the different water jets, or you can rest many of your fingers at the same time and really fluidly move around. So so I'll kind of I'll show another example in a moment, but really I want to have like a sort of an intellectual framework for how that fits together. And so let's just look at this because it really affects how we think about humans and machines in general. And so this is part of some larger research that is really on how we can mediate between the outside world and the human too. And so that same kind of fluid experience. And so some of this is related actually to some of Steve's previous work on humanistic intelligence and how you can have the senses, human senses and machine senses, and then how you can affect the outside world with both, and they interplay. And so so for me, that interesting research was really looking at so I did some quite interesting things with hearing assistance and seeing assistance that opened up a new multidimensional mathematical framework on sort of smart sensing kind of methodology, and quite a few interesting signal processing and new technologies that can be used for aerospace and high-speed transportation. They can be used for cameras and even assistive devices for humans to help people sense the world around them better. And coming from HDR photography, but working with welding and so on. And so some of these algorithms, I'll I'll just skip through some of this, but it was pretty interesting new algorithms, and it really comes down to even the sensing itself. And so that was kind of a new thing with valence flux. That was a new kind of creation out of this work, and so the sensing the capacity to sense itself. And so all of this really, and so this was we did the first ever valence flux, biovalometrics, and for control panels and so on. But really, how it really is opening up how we can relate machines to humans. And for me, it's with you have a high-speed vehicle or whether you have a musical instrument, you really want to design it in a way that that works super seamlessly, and you can't spare any second of uncertainty with a vehicle where human lives are at stake. And the same thing, it leads to all these amazing stories where we did these concerts with these music concerts with kind of pretty interesting technology where when everybody's watching, you can't have, you know, a frame drop, you can't have anything cut out for a moment, because you just need this really intimate connection, fluid and intimate connection between the person, the musician, and the sound and the experience. And so that it's almost like an experience for the audience, but it also has to be an experience for you, the person. And that's really how we really have to design human machine interfaces to make it really really work, whether you're doing, you know, seeing aids, hearing aids, and how it all fits together in what I was calling this sense space. So so it's really kind of an intellectual framework for how we conceptualize all this stuff. And so same with vehicles and instruments. Now let me just close out and we can go to questions. But in the season that we're in, it would be interesting to actually here's actually a piece of music on Hydraulophone that was it's quite seasonal right now in the Christmas season. So I hope, oh, let me just stop sharing again because I want to share with sound again so you can hear that. And I want to share this piece. And so hopefully you can see and hear the screen here. And by the way, I don't know if the previous one was coming through, and I'll just and so if you didn't hear this one, this was the Hydraulophone where we're hearing this really fluid and continuous sound. And then let's play this one. So this is actually
so we're all rolling, ready?
An immersive kind of Hydraulophone.
Speed.
And so there are two Hydraulophones being played here. right. So thank you very much, and that is a little look at how aerodynamics and fluids and human-computer interaction, human-machine interaction, and musical instruments really work together. And so the water really means a lot, both for us as people, water and fluids, fluid flow. It's really important for life safety considerations and really how machines interact with their environment. So thank you.
Wonderful. That was wonderful. That was a great talk. Really, really inspiring to see how we can think more generally with the transpod. It gives us the idea that we can broaden this interface taxonomy to think about. Okay, we have a human. When we have today at the beach, we had these smart eyeglasses on when we were going swimming in the ice water. So we had the human inside the technology, inside the water. But now we can talk about the human inside the clothing, inside the transpod container, inside the pipe, inside the earth, maybe under the ocean. So you got these layers of interface taxonomy. And I really do think, like if Ryan, if you and I get together with Mark Fox and Mark Matson, I think we'll be able to build out this ontology in a very profound way as taking a leadership role in this field of research. And we also have Tomoko Yonzawa from Japan and other really great scholars joining us. Derek Lamb will be joining us. And Derek's going to talk about the underwater sequential wave imprinting machine. So traditionally swims, like in the 1970s, we'd put our swim on a little vessel and slide it back and forth on the surface of the water to interact with sound waves in water through marine radar. But and then swim motors would be, ways of putting swims on motors that only really work in air because the swims are like a giant fin that slows the motor down when it's in water. And what Derek is experimenting with is putting LEDs, just individual, like a single LED on the shaft of a motor, and then using it as a form of underwater analog optical communication, because the purpose of the swim is very real time. Like if you look at how swims work, it allows you to interact, human water computer interaction using analog computers originally in the 60s. WaterHCI in the 1960s and 70s was instantaneous, like there was zero lag. Everything moves at the speed of light. And so it provides this very fluid form of interaction that we've come to expect. And so we're often disappointed at modern technologies. I always feel we're kind of like an Amish community that can't stand the delay and sluggishness of modern technology. And you see, I like computers that are quick like they were in the 60s, not computers that are slow like they are today. And so what Derek has done is, it was this LED on the swim. Now we have this almost infinite bandwidth optical communication to the swim that's above the surface of the water or in an augmented reality headset. So it allows us to see the tilting of fields in motors and pumps and water-based interaction. So that will be really good. So we'll have like maybe a 3-minute break because I think we're running slightly behind schedule. So just to get back on schedule, we'll shorten the break to about 3 minutes, which should be enough time to pee. If the toilet talk didn't make you need to pee, certainly the hydraulophone performance will. You'll never have kidney stones if you listen to hydraulophone music because it'll keep things moving. But anyway, on that happy note, we'll take like a 3-minute pee break. And then once we've dealt with the liquids that are inside us, we'll then come back and continue with Derek at approximately just a couple of minutes after 5, like let's say 5:03 p.m. here Eastern or 2:03 p.m. Pacific in about 3 minutes. Okay, so we've had a nice little intermission, and I think ready for Derek.
Ready for you.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Steve, for the excellent introduction. And yes, indeed, the talk that I'll be giving today will be focused on motor and MO-valence and its application for underwater optical communication, which is a rather fascinating problem with the original conception of MO-valence, which those who are familiar with swim would know had the linear, the bar basically that would show the LEDs and the waveform imprinted in space perpendicular to the direction of motion. Quite a problem when moving through water, 1,000 times denser than air. So I'll be showing how we can use a different perpendicularity to show waveforms of motors in water. Okay, let's throw this up. Okay, so to begin, I'll just give an introduction to the MO-valence methodology and its applications. Traditionally, we look at machine pattern control and load analysis through MO-valence. And then I'll be giving the contribution here. It's a swim compression for drag-sensitive applications. As Steve alluded to, with a single LED swim, we use intensity-encoded analog communication. And then we have a software-mediated streaming swim decompression. Okay, so MO-valence is the visualization, essentially, of electric machines. And as Steve said, the real-time nature of this, the speed of light, responsiveness of swim is especially crucial in MO-valence because the way, and I'll explain this as the presentation goes on, the way that the wave is imprinted is and responds to phase changes is at the speed of a motor. So if the motor is running at 10,000 RPM, the swim, which would be resolving things in degrees of that, would need to run thousands of times faster. So the motors that we see and use every day are largely opaque. They have internal electromagnetic fields. These are invisible. And what we had proposed earlier last year for active motors, and in Pete Scorbataco's work several years ago in designing this for passive machines as well, and who laid the foundation and created the concept of motor swim, is to attach these swims to an electric machine body. And so this is our class, as we know, of visualizing stationary quantities in space that is carried by some known frequency. In this case, this is our motor operating speed. Usually this is done by heterodyning the signal to baseband using the input frequency or chirp as a reference signal. And of course, this is often displayed on a linear array of LEDs, akin to like a dot bar voltmeter. And in the case of swim, the shaft is fixed, basically where all the permanent magnets in a PMSM sit. But the output display, all the batteries, all the electronics are actually mounted to the body of the machine, which is shown here in blue, and it rotates with the motor. So there are two, I guess, broad categories of motor swim. The first one is the passive machine. This is powered mechanically. So what we get from a swim that is attached to the voltage, or across two coils of this, are the back EMF and, in essence, the angular profile of magnetic flux linkage, and we get that from Faraday's law. Now, what you can get out of this is a very interesting machine pattern analysis. the stationary quantity in this case is actually the internal magnetic field of the motor, the permanent magnets in this case. And so every revolution, it sweeps out the exact same magnetic profile under the same load conditions. So we have exact overlap of wave crests, and that's really the underlying stationary principle. What you see here in this animation is actually us modulating speed. And due to just due to Faraday's law, and also the high bandwidth of swims, at higher speeds you don't see any phase contamination, but you do see the true effect of higher voltage amplitudes from higher speeds. And again, since we have an exact correspondence of this visual waveform to the stator position, we can identify asymmetries. We can also see readily the effect of Lenz's law, which is that in one direction we get one of the two waveforms here, and in the other we actually get the reverse. Yes. Okay, so for active machines, this is work that we did recently, as recently as last year, for powering and measuring the device under test at the same time in the rotating reference frame. In this case, our swim apparatus is constrained to be either battery powered or slip ring powered, and radial balanced as well. In the paper that we published to IEEE SVR, we used transconductance amplifiers. We monitored the instantaneous load current using a shunt and then amplified that to display directly on our swims. And then the interesting thing we get with active swims is observations of reactions to control inputs and disturbances. And we can see that in both phase, waveform, distortion, and amplitude. For example, we performed work with machine load analysis using swims and using comparisons between long exposure photographs taken under load and under no load. So here we have one color per phase. We have no load apply on the top and load apply on the bottom, where the phase shift indicated the amount of load due to increased power, the increased power draw. So under no load, we had no mechanical power, and then under load, the voltage and current waveforms aligned and also aligned to the timing of higher torque when sweeping past the rotor magnets. And we were able to calculate the load torque based on this relationship, the electrical angle versus expected torque. Okay, so I guess all that was really introduction to what this will be showing in an underwater swim context. So we know that the prototypical swim, it imprints waveforms along an axis perpendicular in space to motion. And all the swims that we showed previously are spatially linear swims that are built to operate in air. And we have orders of magnitude more drag in water, so we have to shrink the area of the swim by this amount as well. So the water swim, in this case for motors, is a space to intensity perpendicularity. So in fact, we completely skip out on space entirely. And we use a software mediation to invert this mapping in real time. And with that, we're showing fundamental properties of electrical machines. We're using swims to make visible this otherwise hidden rotating magnetic field, and we're augmenting the understanding of our passive and active machines intuitively. And with that, I guess we'll jump over to the demo, unless there are any questions. Okay, let me just get this set up. I guess I should actually take the opportunity first to show in real light what we have here. Okay, so just a closer look at this swim prototype. We have our power source and the bulk of our drag, actually. This is the swim, and we have a voltage and current. It might not show very well through the compression, but we have our three-phase inverter, and then we have the completely non-electronic stationary attachment point. So I'll be just hooking that in here. I'm just starting the script up now. Okay, great. Yeah, so this is a post-process script that's running through the webcam on my laptop. And what you see in red, which might be a little hard in this case, but this red dot will show the centroid of the swim as it comes online. Okay, great. And then get it started. Okay, let's see if I can get this aligned properly. Okay, so the inner waveform, what you see kind of on the poles here are the expanded current waveform swims coming out of a single LED, which is the white ring in the middle there. And then on the outer and on the horizontal poles here, you'll see the voltage swim. And these are just the voltage and current waveforms that are mapped to our single LED swims. Now, I'll bring my finger here and then I'll push it onto the body of the motor, and you can see right away, before I actually completely desynchronize it, you'll see that it actually starts to move the waveform over as it matches the load torque by synchronizing with the highest torque points on the motor in the stator. And every time I bring my finger down, you can see the amount that it will shift will be proportional to the amount of friction that I apply on the body. And yeah. There we go. I guess I can stay in the red light for now in case there are any questions about the setup. But yeah, that's our single LED swim for drag sensitive applications.
Very, very nice. That was fantastic. That's really groundbreaking work, because what that really means is it revolutionizes the way that underwater swims can work by simply optical communication. Like, that LED could be embedded right in the shaft, so not only would it be flush with the shaft, it could actually be under the shaft. You could drill in and inset it right into the motor, so it induces zero drag and conveys all the swim information, and have, in a sense, as long of a swim as you wanted, as long as the arms could, in a virtual sense, be as long as they needed to be to make that visible. So that what's really nice about that is we can clearly see the tilting of the magnetic field. So the magnetic field is in there in a certain position, maybe like this, and when you grab it or load it, it tilts the field. You can see that as you apply a load to the shaft by putting your hand against it to make the motor do more work, as you try to slow it down with your fingers, and then the motor has to draw more current to maintain its speed. You can see that field tilts. It's very clearly visible. This is something that should be in every teaching lab. Like everybody should understand this phenomenology. It makes it really, really clear. And we could see even with pumps and motors when there's, depending on the fluid or the characteristics of the fluid or how much head. I mean, it would be really interesting to put this on a pump and play those head games, do this hydraulic head or flow as a hydraulic head as a function of flow, and maybe look at the swims for different amounts of head. You could look at the swim pattern on the motor and learn a lot about not just the characteristic curve of the motor, but you could even envision maybe like a long exposure photograph with a pump underwater for a certain amount of head, and then move it and increase the head and move it and increase the head, or flow vice versa, and have this thing plot itself a graph of head, of the images as a function of head, let's say. So at 1 foot of head, here's what it looks like. At 2 feet of head, here's what it looks like. At 3 feet of head, here's what it looks like. And literally see the evolution of hydraulic head on an underwater swim. That would actually revolutionize the way the whole water industry goes. So I think this could be really a significant work.
Yeah, I mean, akin to like, turning the, turning the valve open, you would have this swim that would actually be turning open as we go along the axis of head or axis of power input. It's a like seriously intuitive, even just for phase. This was originally birthed out of a project I had for improving the phase matching for a sensitive, like a flywheel reaction wheel. So it was highly sensitive to the power output at low speeds. And I didn't have a linear swim on me. And then I realized, oh, actually, this is mostly equivalent, but much more compact. So